Do you consume webinars endlessly? Do you attend countless courses? How about listening to educational podcasts and still you see very little change in your business or career? Today, we are talking about application loops and why the real value of learning and improving your intellectual health comes from turning insight into action quickly. Because let's face it, information without implementation is just entertainment. Today I'm joined by Paul Andrew, who is a former commercial radio leader and BBC coach who's worked with some of the biggest names in broadcasting. He now helps podcasters become powerful hosts. I'm Ildiko Steely, your routine and performance strategist. And this is Routine is Revenue, where we connect your personal health routines directly to your business and career performance. Paul, in business and of course in podcasting as well, people consume endless amounts of content, courses, webinars, programs, online information, everything. Why is it that most business people and entrepreneurs are still not seeing real change in their business or performance after all that?
Because we all still think that consuming these courses and now it's so easy to do things on Zoom and watch YouTube and pick up skills. We all think we're doing something when we're doing that. We think we're learning, but actually a lot of the time we're just watching. And do we actually close the loop between those training sessions and the things that we learn, the things that we will say in this podcast today? And I was listening to your podcast the other week and thought exactly the same thing as I was preparing. But will we pick up those things and will we action the things that we learn? Because we waste so much time consuming. I mean, I say also to podcasters, suddenly you're creators of content, not consumers of content. So if it's even more important not to spend the hours of time on scrolling on Instagram and consuming content, but actually consuming the world around you to create content, because you're now not a consumer, you're a creator of content, which is what you're doing here today.
Yeah, take it all in slightly differently. So with that, let's dive really deep in what the real problem is, which is obviously not the lack of knowledge, but the lack of applying what we already know, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, go on.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge-wise, we're more spoilt than ever before. With just the accessibility of knowledge that's there. But yeah, it's recognizing that unless we do something with that knowledge, then it's not gonna help our business. I had an old Australian boss when I was at Heart Radio, who just is like, well, what difference is it going to make on Monday morning? What are you going to do differently, mate? That was his kind of, because they would lay on. I mean, they would have to pay for, in those days, we'd all travel somewhere central. We'd go to a big training course, and it's a waste of money. But now, because it's essentially free to consume all this stuff.
That's even worse, isn't it then?
Yeah.
Because and also people suffer with FOMO, and then there's the shiny object syndrome, and you just want to consume everything and you think it's the next thing that's going to make your business thrive.
Like almost a devil that sits on your shoulder and just goes, oh, you could watch that. You get a newsletter through about some new AI tool, and suddenly, I mean, this is me and I'm talking about it. I can spend, I'll be off down a rabbit hole, then I'll be fiddling with something, then I'll be building a little app that I don't even need to do. Then I'll find a new planning system that takes me longer to install than the one, just doing things. I absolutely understand, especially, you're going from, working perhaps in a team to working perhaps on your own. I think just that discipline is really, really important. And there are lots of shiny things
because there's no
after.
Team around you to support with all the rest of it. Yeah. So you feel that you need to learn absolutely everything until you get there financially, that you can actually build a team around you again.
Well, yeah, you do, because you think, well, I've got to learn how this, Kajabi works. I've got to learn how, another system works to, that you need. And there is that sort of imposter syndrome where you think, I've got to know everything now. I can't just know the bit that I knew before. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's name this. So it's application loops that we need to sort of install into our lives. How does it actually work? What does it mean in practical terms?
I don't know what the official answer to this question is, but to me, it's about finding a way of working that makes sure that you get those things done. That it makes sure that not just from the courses that you might watch or attend, but actually just day to day, how do you get the things done that you need to get done? And so I think really, closing the loop is about finding different systems or ways of doing things, building things into your routine that mean you automatically, crack on with things. And in preparing this, it's just a great reminder. I've thought, crumbs, I've got to get back into that habit. I've got to get back into that habit. So that's some of the tips that we'll talk about today.
So do you have any tips for that?
So I've come from a radio background, so running heart radio stations, capital radio stations, doing some work at the BBC, and now I'm working in podcasting, coaching podcast hosts,
Yes.
which is how we met. But even just building that course, you can just procrastinate, put things off, and I know it's very, very easy to do, and I found it particularly easy to do. Just to sort of keep pushing deadlines back and thinking, oh, maybe I could do that better, and going for perfect.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that's really hard when you just want to get better at things. And funny enough, this morning I was watching a webinar about sales, and she very much emphasized that we will never ever be ready. So just get on with things. But before we move on too far, I just wanted to go back to kind of the definition of the application loop. Although, as you said, it's not necessarily the official, or if there is an official definition of application
what do you see
loops,
that means?
But the way I see it is, like a bit of advice I give in my training module on that is, when you schedule a webinar, schedule another hour within 24 hours to make sure that you look at how you can implement it, or actually how to implement what you've learned into your working practices, and make sure that you apply at least one thing to your working practices. So that's how you sort of close a loop, instead of just consuming webinar after webinar after webinar, or whether it's a program or online or in person, it doesn't actually matter. But schedule time in your calendar to apply what you've learned.
Appointments with yourself are really important. And I mean, the other thing that you're doing when you're doing that is something that is massively, I could work on, and that's thinking time. You're spending time. It's not a task. You scheduled half an hour in your diary to think about the training. You've just got that time. You're going to go through your notes. You're going to work out what of this is a waste of time and useless, and what are the things that I'm going to implement, and what are the sparkly shiny things that I'm going to leave well behind. But and throughout the sort of tips of how to close those loops, there's quite a lot. You hear quite a lot of thinking time, but different ways of thinking for different reasons. So that's
recognizing that some of it is not procrastination, some of it is actual. I think that it is so hard when you're running your own business and you are kind of forced to do everything anyway. To understand that the thinking time is just as important as all the doing time, because just staring at your screen all the time is not going to move the needle forward every day.
I'm working from home at the moment, and my wife says to me, "Why aren't you in the office working?" She sees me wandering around the house, or lazing on the sofa, or even laying on the double bed. And yes, sometimes my eyes do close, but some of that time, when you're prepping material, you're thinking through strategies, you do want to just have that thinking time, that time out time, that meeting with yourself, as long as you focus it, because then there's lots of other shiny things that can get in the way of the thinking. So, and that might be one of these, or it might be a 6-year-old, or it might be whatever, but it's just protecting that time to do that thinking.
From your coaching experience, how do you find that people, how do they translate what they've learned into actual consistent action?
Well, I mean, doing what you said, but also I think accountability is really important. So with presenters, radio presenters that I've worked with over the years, they will say, we want to start this new feature, we want to do this. They've gone to some training, or they've had an idea, they want to action something. And I think accountability just really helps, whether you're telling the listeners that you're going to launch this in 2 weeks, or whether you're telling the boss you're going to launch this in 2 weeks, or whether you're just putting it on a calendar somewhere to say we're going to launch this in 2 weeks. That is something that will help close the loop, because the actions from the trainings or whatever, you don't need to do them all straight away, obviously, but you want to capture them and put them somewhere. And so, we would end up with a breakfast show, planned for the 12 months really. And we'd gradually populate the plan, and we would make sure we had enough, production time and prep time to get the features away, all the things that we wanted to do done. So but accountability, I hired a consultant who helps me with my coaching course a bit extra, because I know that I will feel stupid if I have my bi-weekly call with him, and I'm sort of lagging behind or not got things done, because I find shame sort of motivates me.
Yes,
if I tell my wife I'm going to launch on this date, or I'm telling my consultant, okay, I'll do these 2 things or 3 things by next time, you feel stupid. So accountability to other people will really, really help close. It's one way of helping to close those loops.
I think that's really good advice, because that really helps with people's thinking and changes their behavior of how to close that application loop, doesn't it? I think that accountability is a very good one.
I remember when I was running Heart in Bristol, the traffic in Bristol is chaotic. So it's just busy all the time. And we were running traffic bulletins, I don't know, once, like a bit in the morning, a bit in the afternoon. And I said to I was stood in the lift foyer, and I said to my boss, Bristol's so bad with traffic. We ought to be running traffic every hour. We got in the lift. And he said, yeah, great idea. What's, do it. And I went, well, I'll have to check with this person, check with this person, check with this person. He said, and in the end, I'd got traffic news back on every hour by the time the lift had reached the top floor. Just because there was that accountability with my boss. I didn't want to look an idiot. And he was very action focused. And I just thought, fine. He said, it's the right thing to do. So just do it. Just call the newsroom right now from the lift and tell them we're going to do traffic every hour now. They're a bit
Good
like,
thing you had reception in the lift.
But it's that. I mean, that for me is my best of practice in my career, when I've just gone, something needs doing. It's a little bit tricky because it involves organisation and people and all of that. And normally that's a reason to kick things down the road, isn't it? But he just pressured, in a nice way, just said, you know the answer, so just do it. There's no reason to question it.
How can people turn that accountability on themselves when they are working for themselves and they're still doing everything on their own, like business owners?
I do think it's still about, only because this works for me, it's about telling other people. Now, that might be the family, when they come for lunch on Sunday, you're saying, this week I'm going to do this. Or it might be, part of your network, when you're in the coffee shop and you meet, another entrepreneur or another business person, just to say, yeah, we're going to do this next month. And I think just because of, none of us want to look silly, especially to our peers, then I think that's how I keep myself accountable.
So now that you don't have a boss, you are your own boss. So you said you've got a consultant now, so that you use your consultant as your accountability partner.
And my wife as well, and my wife. But I a little bit like that, yeah.
So actually, in your coaching, you do apply a proven core idea that learning should be turned into action within sort of 24 to 72 hours. But how do you take something that someone has learned and turn it into immediate usable action that actually sticks with them?
Okay, well, first of all, so if we're listening back to this podcast, I'll listen back to it and I'll make some notes, and I will have, just because, when you listen to things, you critique, I'll have lots and lots of things. I'll try and find first of all, really good things about the podcast. So we'd always start with positives, and everyone relaxes in the room. It's quite nice.
Is it the shit sandwich coming?
Well, it sort of is, but I only work on one or two things at a time, because I think we're all very critical. And I mean, unless there's some quick wins, some low-hanging fruit you can capture. But I would tend to say, okay, so this week, it's a bit like my son's football training. This week, we're going to work on
your left foot or your right foot.
Well, yeah, or planning ahead, planning ahead. So by the end of the week, we're going to have a monthly plan for the podcast for, the next month. And just work on that. Then look at the plan. So rather than doing that, then rushing to the next thing, if you want to embed it, the next session will say, right, let's have a look at the plan. What do we think of it? How can we improve it? Again, just another little learning loop. And
I suppose I do share that myself, because my temple method is made of 6 parts.
Yes.
But for a one-to-one program, the first one is about planning.
Yeah.
And then we go through each and every element week by week, because I can't possibly overwhelm my clients with loads of stuff to do. So every week is just apply this one thing and let that become the norm.
Yeah.
And then the next week, we're going to apply this other thing and let that become the norm, and so on. And of course, at the end, we can do some further planning.
Yeah, and not rush ahead. If there's always pressure to get through the training and all the rest of it. But actually, just deal. I would tend to just deal with one thing at a time. I mean, that can work in coaching, anywhere. If we're coaching, Ben here on his editing, we could listen back to the show and say, right, when, what are the bits of editing that really worked, and where did you put some imagination and creativity, and the intro at the start, and then so that's always building the positives, because that motivates people. So if you want something to embed, you don't want them to feel not confident, or not, that they're just being told to do something they don't believe in. So coaching then is saying, right, Ben, what did you, what do you think are the main areas that we can work on? And normally, if the person is the right person for the job, and if you've trained them over time, they'll say, yeah, the thing was, and you don't ever need to criticize them. They will say, well, yeah, I didn't like, Ben will critique his own work if he feels relaxed with me as a coach, and he'll say, yeah, we need to work on this and this. And then you go, well, which is the most important? And then you go, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do to make that happen? And it might be, I'm going to put a planner on the wall, or whatever it is, actually physical things that are going to happen. Does that make sense?
I think it does. Absolutely. But yeah, it is. And actually, when you're coaching someone, it's very much a two-way street, isn't it? You help people. The whole point is that you're helping someone find a better version of themselves and grow into that better version of themselves, don't you?
Yeah. And just like, with a kid crossing the road, to start with, you tell them, look left, look right. And now with Rosie, my little 6-year-old, it's, okay, Rosie, you're in charge of crossing the road now. What are we going to do? And just helping them, literally holding their hand through it. And then when they come to do it on their own, hopefully they're confident enough to do it. So, it's very similar, but just one thing at a time. The old thing about if you chuck lots of balls at someone, they won't catch any of them. If you chuck one ball, they'll catch it. And that's embedding along with the positivity.
If you were listening to this thinking this is exactly where I get stuck, that is not accidental. You have the business strategies, but leaking energy and focus through weak personal health routines. This is the work I do privately with business owners who are ready to build their routines so their business can run without it costing them their health. Now, over your time with all these radio stations, you've coached some big voices in broadcasting. Would you be able to name any of them and share any experiences, or anyone specifically if someone was stuck in some kind of a learning mode and then applying your technique or your support, their behavior and results have changed?
Yeah, I mean, the thing you often find yourself working on, and we did this a bit with the shows I worked on at Radio 1 and with the breakfast shows, particularly on Heart and Capital Radio, is just like a podcast, and this is where I mess up everything I'm actually demonstrating, but you can waffle, you can go off point, and a lot of those radio shows that you were trying to get them to recognize that just because they thought each other were funny doesn't mean the audience are enjoying it. And when you're dealing with,
sometimes it's like, what are they laughing at?
Yeah, and you just, I would just say, okay, guys, that's and because they're in it. And they probably just broadcast it with live radio. So you're coming out of the show and then you're having a debrief. They're very defensive about it because it's their creative work, and also it's personal because you're criticizing them because it's the way their personality is coming across. So it's a really difficult thing to deal with, actually, is just this waffle and this sort of over laughing thing that you hear quite a lot on.
Actually, I suppose radio and podcasting is very different, because radio is just something that's on. People put it on and they know that it's just going to continue. While with podcasting, especially like a producer like myself, I've learned over time that people just simply don't have the attention span to listen to a program for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
And consequently, I actually took that on board and reduced the episode lengths to half an hour, because it's a lot more palatable for listeners.
Yeah, some of these really big American podcasts have gone off with 2-hour, 3-hour episodes. And I just think, hang on, well, you have to answer the question, you have to go, what's your target audience? So we would start with the Heart Breakfast show, and we literally would take a film crew into someone's house at breakfast time, and we would film what's going on, and we would play it back to the presenters, the Heart Breakfast show presenters, just to go, this is your audience, look at what they're doing. Mum's baking toast, the kids are getting dressed, Johnny's lost a shoe, Dad's overslept.
And it's just like noise in the background.
Absolutely.
And then occasionally your ears might
that's something that, and this is, triggers. So, this is technique of hosting, but yes, you'll say something that, that will prick up in someone's ear, and then they'll get the attention, but only for a few seconds. So all the little nuanced bits of humor and, the long stories, the audience in that environment are getting, but it depends what your podcast is, because I imagine people listening to this, maybe they're going for a run, maybe, they're a bit more one-to-one.
But it's supposed to be a lot more educational, where people can learn how to better their lives when they are in business, to make sure that what they produce is of better quality, like in terms of their business. And then, of course, routine is revenue. So the revenue, it shows on your bottom line when you are, as a person, as the leader of your business.
Yeah.
You elevate your own status by looking after all areas of your health. And here, just to sort of anchor it a little bit, the application loop comes under intellectual health.
Yes.
Because you just need to be aware of what you're learning, what you're letting in, what affects your thoughts, and that will affect your emotions and so on. So go on. Can you name anyone who was your best customer when you were at radio, who applied your teachings?
I was we created a show in Bristol. Two shows. We created a breakfast show in Cardiff for Capital Radio called Matt, Polly and Geraint, and we created a show in Bristol called Bush, Troy and Paulina. So they were just the crew that would wake you up, like a crew style show. Like Paulina, for instance, was not from any sort of broadcast background, just like, this is what I say to podcasters. You think people on, network radio or television, but they started somewhere. Yeah. And she just got on really well with the two male presenters that I had. We went out for a meal one night, And I could just, I mean, we would all be just bouncing off each other. The producer, myself, the three presenters, and you just go, this is going to work. So we took her off the, whatever she was doing, and we stuck her on the breakfast show prime slot. And she worked really hard at what she did. So one thing I get, sorry, I come off along like this all day, so I would shut up. But if you want examples, just this thing about capturing what you see, hear, taste, smell, and touch. So she would carry a little book around her with her just to capture reactions. Just to capture, if she was reading up on someone they're going to interview, she'd just underline and highlight things, and they'd be her own unique reactions, not things she thought she ought to say. And she just really brought her personality, really, really brilliantly into the show. And for someone who, has come from a non-broadcast background, I actually think Anthony Scaramucci does it very well, very well. I think, he's a big show off, which helps. But you want the best hosts have got big ego. So,
well, I suppose, yeah.
You have, to
it
do
kind of,
this.
Kind of works, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it does. Which he has. But yeah, he's come from his arena of finance and American politics. And he's, I really, really rate him as a presenter, yeah.
So what sort of signs can somebody listening to us waffling on about this recognize in themselves that tell them that they are stuck in consumption rather than application?
Well, they don't get anything done.
Well, the thing is, because you feel like you're getting things done, but are you getting the right things done?
Yes.
So how do you encourage people to recognize what is the right thing to do?
Right. Well, this is, I went on a course years ago when I was working for Hart with a guy called Graham Olcott, who wrote a book called The Productivity Ninja. And I meant to bring it to show it, but I forgot it. It's back in Bristol. So
I think I've heard the title. Yeah.
Yeah, I do follow this regime, and it says get out of the office, sit in a coffee shop, or just get some space, whatever that is for you. It might be sitting on a train or whatever, but a length of time, like 3 hours, and go through really everything you need to do in your life. So, we're replacing some decking in our back garden, so that's a project, and it's like, what do I need to do to get that done, and schedule it in, and then okay, we've got to plan the next interview for the hostcraft, what we're going to do, and just work out what just think about it. All we need to do is just think, because we all know what the most important things are in our business. We don't need to go to a strategy day or whatever, but just think all the things I've got to do.
Funny you say that, but isn't the strategy day exactly that? To be
Yes,
out
well, that's
of your
true,
standard environment, maybe come together with a small group of people.
Yes.
And indeed talk about what you need to do in your business.
Yes. Yeah.
And then identify those couple of most important things.
Yeah. No, that is true. But this is more of a habit. It's like every Wednesday afternoon, Paul isn't in the office, Paul's in the coffee shop or the hotel, whatever he's, wherever, because that's my most important time of the week. And everything, when you're running radio stations, everything is trying to push, that.
Okay, so
time.
your suggestion is to literally take out a number of hours every single week that we don't have. I mean, I teach people to introduce micro actions, which take seconds sometimes or up to a few minutes in order to...
Yes, well,
that's kind of more on the 1%.
Well, that helps you start to feel like you're getting things done
theory.
as well. That's true.
But wow,
but I love that time, and even when it was there was a new breakfast show launching, and there were clients kicking off, and we had to do pitches for different things, and there was an HR issue, and there was something else. Just as much as you can protect that time, but I wouldn't say it's just for the business. I would say it's for my whole life, really.
Wow.
So I would sit there and just think through, right, what are we, my wife's really keen to get some stuff done. That's really important.
Do you write things down?
Yeah, I would write it down.
And do you have like a bit of a, not necessarily agenda, but like a little tick sheet, call it whatever you want, like something that prompts you to make sure that you listen to that you think through every part?
Well, no, I haven't got a system in that way. But I would just, I don't know, this was years ago, and I've evolved what I do with Graham system. I'm trying to think now, actually, were there prompts in there? I'm not sure there were. But just that thinking time. So thinking about back garden project, right, what we're going to do this week. We're going to choose the wood, and we're going to, whatever. So it's just, and you feel just so much more in control of your life. And it's 2 or 3 hours really well invested.
I'll tell you, one thing that's been really working for me lately is really paying attention to that planning your next day kind of thing.
Yes.
And sort of dumping things out of my mind.
Yeah.
But I suppose in some way that's a bit of an application loop as well, isn't it? That
you
close the day off.
Yeah. There's no point having the thinking time unless you then go, right, what actions, put them through the week in a way that you can manage to get them all done. So that means lots of planned time for interruptions as well.
What would you suggest that if someone continues learning without applying, even if they feel like that they are working on themselves, which kind of, whenever we take on any courses and watch any webinars, we do still feel like that some of that information will stick. But what is one simple routine that you can suggest that they can adopt to create an actual application loop so learning improves their performance?
So, okay, well, with presenters and hosts, I would encourage them to take that time to listen back to their work, and so that's almost their strategy time. So with presenters, it is, do you listen back to the show? And with music radio, 4 hours breakfast shows 5 days a week, you can't listen back to everything, but just for them to have some awareness. And again, I hear Anthony Scaramucci talking about how he listens back to every single show, and that's why he's improved so quickly.
Sorry, having heard him, it kind of made me feel like that his ego is quite large, and he likes his own voice.
Loves to listen. Yeah, most presenters hate listening back to their own voice, really especially with someone else. Yeah,
because I started. I'm kind of at 60 plus episodes now. I started rewatching my episodes at about episode 12, kind of partially for quality control. But then what I learned immediately was that I do a weekly newsletter. And then, of course, it gives a nice little spine, like a topic, to go through the newsletter. And I love rewatching my episodes. And, of course, the number of weeks go past between recording and publishing. And it's like, oh, my God, I completely forgot about that. And that is actually probably my own application loop, because that's my kind of implementation there. I discuss something really interesting with the guests. And then a few weeks later when I listen, that really embeds my own learning. And then, of course, I type it as well, because then I incorporate it into the newsletter.
Yeah. So you're doing a few things. Yes.
The application loop, and then passing the information back onto the customers, onto my audience, which is really good. But when I have recordings of my speaking, now that I struggle with.
Yeah.
Those I don't really rewatch. So
that's normal. That's normal.
Well, the thing is, here I'm talking, and I don't mind my own voice. I don't mind watching it. But again, it's a conversation. But
yeah, no, all presenters, especially if it's a meeting and you're in there with the boss, it's really hard sometimes to listen back to your own performance. A few presenters I work with just wouldn't do it point blank. They were saying, "Oh, I don't listen back."
Really?
Yeah, 100%. They just couldn't. They just and I agreed, because they almost had such a critical ear, such a good ear for what isn't right, and people with ego will tend to notice the negatives much before the positives. So you always say to presenters, "What did you like about that?" And they go, "Well, I didn't really like." You go, "No, what did you like about it?" Right? Which you can do with your own show. If you listen to all of your shows and you just notice things but never did anything with them, you've created another, application loop that's not closing. So
fun enough, I always ask my guests if they can suggest any micro action. And obviously we've already gone through the weekly, take out several hours and just evaluate everything that you're doing and make up a kind of weekly to-do list, more or less. Although some people don't like to do this either, but then that's another story, I suppose, and there's another conversation. But can you think of any micro actions that people can apply to make sure that whatever they consume, they can learn, they can turn it into?
The first thing is just to recognize that that's happening, because really, until I started really thinking about this, I didn't really see it as almost an epidemic of learning, that's coming at us all. And actually, there is an issue because we can't take it all on board.
That's a really interesting way of putting it, because indeed now that, especially obviously since COVID, we are a lot more people are working from home.
Yeah.
And it's a lot more easy to just get lost in your own laptop or computer. And another email popped up, and another, offering you all sorts of webinars that are probably fitting to your work. But how often do you actually stop and realize, hang on a minute, I've listened to this time and time again.
Yeah.
Do I actually do it? Yeah.
And that's where it, because you don't have the thinking chunk in the week. You never actually think, right, I've really got to make sure I do that first of all. So that does help. That does help to close it. But yes, I think first of all, just recognizing for me, and you sort of know it, but it is a bit of a revelation as well, that there is this information epidemic. And then it is recognizing that if you don't do something between the 24 and 72 hour window, you probably won't get it done. So if there's any action, if you're listening to this podcast now and you think, or I listened to yours the other week, and you think, I ought to do the journaling you were talking about. Very emotive, actually, very powerful bit of audio. But if I don't action that journaling within 24 to 72 hours, it just won't. It'll just drop off the radar.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so that then is about urgency. That's back in the lift going, I've got to get this traffic news on by the time we get to the third floor. It is, but creating that urgency as well. So there's created accountability, but then there's created some urgency with yourself, that, no, I can't go to the hospital to visit mum this afternoon because I've got to get this done. There's a bit of urgency around it. So that's another tip.
To kind of close that loop, so if someone truly masters the application loop and actually gets into the habit of doing implementation sessions and then making sure that things are applied, in your coaching experience, how does it change the speed they grow and execute tasks and ultimately the results that they produce?
Well, and also how they feel about themselves. Because suddenly Paulina will listen back to her tapes from, 2 years ago, and she'll think, even Paulina with her huge ego will think, you know what, I think I've improved, I think I'm getting better. And that creates a real sense of well-being. So coaching, and coaching yourself and coaching others around you is just so key. Just to take that time that someone thinks what I'm doing is important, and just to recognise that, actually we're growing, that we're moving on, that we're changing. So I think, that's an aspect that I think is really important in coaching, as well as recognising the positives and all of this. And suddenly you change the whole work environment, around you. So, yeah.
I love that. And I am really quite happy to close the conversation on the huge positive. Paul, thank you so much for joining me in the studio.
It's a pleasure.
It's been a fantastic conversation about intellectual health and application loops. And let me just sort of squeeze in a little thing that I use in my own training, just for those who stuck with us to the end of the conversation, that information without implementation is just entertainment.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If this episode has shown you where weak health routines are costing you revenue, your next step is simple. Ask yourself this question: is your business draining your energy faster than it grows? If the answer might be yes, I invite you to book a conversation via the link in the show notes. If this conversation made you think, please subscribe, leave a comment, and listen again. If you would like more information on the topic or my guest, all information is in the show notes. Remember, your business will only ever be as healthy as you. Together, let's build routines to bank results.